Like many of you, I've celebrated Palm Sunday every year since I was a little kid. I know how to make the clever little crosses out of palm branches that you're wearing on your shirts right there. I know all the verses to all glory, laud, and honor by heart at this point. I know how to shout Hosanna, Hosanna, at the top of my lungs as Jesus makes his triumphant entry into Jerusalem. It was, and it is, an exciting Sunday that starts out by capturing that hopeful enthusiasm of Jesus' triumphant entry that day. As I've gotten older, the way that I see the events of Palm Sunday have shifted just a little bit. Part of that, honestly, is because at first I didn't really know what the word Hosanna actually meant. For a long time, I thought it meant some churchy version of, we adore you. You rock, Jesus, right? You demand, go King, go. But, it doesn't actually mean any of those. In Hebrew, it really means something less adulatory and somewhat more desperate, actually. It's less generous, more demanding. A more literal translation would be something along the lines of, save now, Jesus. Which feels pretty appropriate, actually. Now, I don't know about you, but I have to admit that I come to Holy Week this year a little bit weary. Maybe you feel the same way, because life certainly has a way of doing that to us, doesn't it? All too often, we find ourselves tired and scared, hungry, tired of God's perceived hiddenness or absence in our life, tired of our own unsteady and unfaithful hearts, scared of what's happening around us or what might or even might not happen next, and hungry for a million small and large and ordinary and extraordinary resurrections to come and fill us with life again. Here we are, cloak in one hand, palm branch in the other. Here we are at the ready, waiting with our mile-long list of expectations for a mighty king to come riding down that mountain and to change everything for us. So often when we yell out Hosanna, we are crying out, save now. Not I love you, not your will be done, not I praise you as you are, you gentle, suffering, vulnerable God. No, save now. Which, don't get me wrong, Jesus does, but not in the way we expect or hope for. And really, if this Palm Passion Sunday is about anything, it's a story about disappointed expectations. It's a story of what happens when the God we want and think we know, that God doesn't show up. And another God, a less efficient, less aggressive, far less muscular God, he shows up instead. And when that happens, then our cries of save us now are met with heartbreaking silence. What happens is our hosannas go dark and our palm branches wither. But God comes as he does for a reason. Now, historians tell us that Jesus knew exactly what he was doing when he asked his disciples to go and secure a donkey or his colt for his journey down the mountain and into the holy city. In fact, in their thought-provoking book, The Last Week, what the Gospels really teach us about Jesus, Marcus Borg and John Crossan argue that two processions entered Jerusalem that first Palm Sunday 2,000 years ago. Jesus didn't have the only triumphant entry that day. Because you see, every year during Passover, which was the Jewish festival, the population of Jerusalem, which was usually around 50,000 people, would swell to at least 200,000 people. Well, in the midst of this festival, the Roman governor of Judea would ride up to Jerusalem from his coastal residence in the west, and he would come in all of his imperial majesty to remind the Jewish pilgrims that Rome demanded their complete loyalty, obedience, and submission. The Jewish people, well, they could commemorate their ancient victory against Egypt and slavery all they want, but if they tried any real-time resistance, well, then they would just be obliterated without a second thought. And as Pilate clanged and crashed his imperial way into Jerusalem from the west, Jesus approached from the east, looking, by contrast, a little ragtag, a little absurd. Unlike the Roman emperor and his legions who ruled by force and coercion and terror, Jesus came defenseless, weaponless into his kingship. And riding that donkey, riding that colt that day, he all but cried out the truth that his rule would have nothing to do with earthly power and might, not even close, but rather love and humility, suffering, sacrifice, ultimately death. If you think about it, if there's a single day in our liturgical calendar that really illustrates the dissonance at the heart of our faith, it's this Palm Passion Sunday. I mean, more than any other, this complicated day of palm fronds and joy and yet power plays and crucifixion, it warns us, really, that the paradoxes that we might not like or might not want are woven into the very fabric of our Christianity. Think about it. God on a donkey, right? Dying to live, a suffering king, Good Friday. These paradoxes calling us at every moment to try to hold together truths that somewhat seem bizarre and counterintuitive and definitely not reconcilable to each other. Now, on good days, I understand that these paradoxes of our faith are precisely what give it its credibility, actually, because we live in a world full of pain and mystery and contradiction. And because of that, we need a faith, we need a religion sturdy enough to bear the weight of this messy world. We need a religion that empowers us, in Richard Rohr's beautiful words, to live in exquisite, terrible humility before reality, he says. But in the face of that, there is a question for us. And that question is, will we choose in our lives the humble and the real? Or will we insist on the delusions of the empire? Are we going to accompany Jesus on his ridiculous little donkey, honoring the precarious path that he's chosen? Or in our impatience, will our broken hosannas undermine the journey we are on? You know, Jesus came declaring God's kingdom coming into this world, kingdom of peace, kingdom of slow, self-emptying love, kingdom of radical embrace, of radical patience, of radical risk that demands from all of us a degree of trust and courage that this empire could never even really imagine. Jesus died, not because a furious Father in heaven needed to kill his precious Son in order to love us, but because Jesus unflinchingly fulfilled the will of God. He died because he exposed the ungracious sham at the heart of all human kingdoms, all empires. He held up a mirror that shocks to the deepest level of our imaginations. And even when Jesus knew that his vocation would cost him his life, he set his face for Jerusalem. And even though he knew who would get the last laugh at Calvary, he mounted that colt and he took Rome for a ride. I can't help but wonder what this Jesus on a colt would have to say about our obsession with ease and efficiency, prosperity and certainty, safety and immunity. I mean, where and how would this parade of the radically vulnerable speak truth to today's centers of power in our world? Well, I think we know. But I also think we know what a difficult challenge this is for us. I mean, we know, don't we, that we are supposed to love the God on a colt who overturns all expectations of what divinity should look like and act like. And yes, in theory, we do love him. But in practice, in our day-to-day lives, all too often, we somewhat pass him over, maybe train our eyes on the horizon and hold out hope for an emperor. I guess in the end, our hope and our comfort can and will be only this. It's not that we hold this paradox. It's that this paradox holds us. We are held and embraced by a God who is way too big for thin, one-dimensional truths, even our own most cherished one-dimensional truths. We are held by a God who sticks with us even when we won't stick with him, a God who accepts our worship even when it's weak and half-baked and selfish, a God who knows all of the reasons that our hearts cry, "Save now," and he carries these broken, strangled cries of ours to the cross. They die with him there. Yes, we will always be afraid of what lies ahead. That's part of our human nature, right? I mean, who knows how many deaths lie around waiting the next corner, how many sorrows and disappointments and farewells and jagged endings you or I must face before resurrection comes home to stay. We can't imagine most of it. Sometimes we fear we can't bear any of it. But Jesus can. And if anything in this Christian story is true, then this must be true as well. Jesus can bear it and will not leave us alone. I mean, there is no death we will die, small or big, literal or figurative, that Jesus will not hold in his crucified arms. Welcome to Holy Week. Here we are. And here is our God. Here are our Hosannas, broken and unbroken, hopeful and hungry. Blessed is the one who comes to die so that we will live.